in this journey, we've had the Lord show up and do a number of amazing things. One of the prominent things that we've seen in these years is the healing of people's bodies, the deliverances from torment, restoration of families, all those kinds of things have been so extraordinary, so amazing. Occasionally we have unusual things happen that I don't take a service for. I just don't. I'll make reference and then I leave it alone. And that's typically my response to the signs that make you wonder. The feathers started just appearing and falling in meetings. And then they started falling in our homes and in restaurants and things like that, just unusual. They want something supernatural bad, so bad they start imagining things. And I understand that problem will probably always be with us. But that is no reason to discount what he does do. And we've had gold dust appear in people's hands for years. I don't ever talk about it, but frequently during worship, we actually had it today. Benny and I both saw gold will start falling during worship. You can't invite God into the house and not have something outside of your box happen. He's just slightly bigger than our understanding. So we have these things happen. They happen with regularity. Sometimes there are things that we go, honestly, for maybe years even without understanding what in the world happened and why. But it happened at such a key moment, there's no way to question that it was the Lord. And at the end, they had a fire towel start ministering to people, and this glory cloud just came and just started hovering somewhere over the platform. I'm not sure where that one was, but there's this cloud. It's hard to explain. It looks like smoke, looks like dust, and when you get close, it's like gold. It's shiny. It's like little flakes, teeny, weeny little flakes. And they're just swirling. And the same thing happened again. I know that night it was over in that corner. It's like gold flakes, and they all went up. They happened over in that corner, but as we were walking around the stage here,
Hello and welcome to Amateur Skeptics Podcast number 56. I'm your host, Brian Heinesser. This episode is an interview that we did with Jason Testerman. Jason Testerman has investigated Bethel Church. He also does a project called Into the Churches, where atheists and theists get together to share ideas. I was joined for this interview by Ian, Mac, and Kimberly. Hey, Jason, you want to actually introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, it makes it know who the hell you are.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so my name's Jason Testerman. I was a Christian for about 25 years, and I was a worship leader and teacher at church, missionary to India, and a part of a big family. I'm the oldest of 12 kids. And so my family was very much connected to a lot of the faith healing movement in the past and currently even now. They really got excited about this Bethel movement, and as I came out of my Christianity and became atheist, obviously I became more and more concerned about what it was spreading. And Bethel Church is in Redding, California. They have thousands of members. They have a school of supernatural ministry which draws thousands and thousands from around the globe. And, basically they say that God is moving here on earth.
Right.
It's hauling in millions and millions of dollars every year. It has a healing ministry that employs hundreds of people. They claim thousands of miracles. Their worship team has sold chart-topping albums and all around the country in the Christian music scene. They have a TV streaming outlet that serves thousands of homes. And anyway, so it's a pretty big organization. It's becoming a phenomenon within the Christian movement that's really influencing millions of people. So my own family is some of those people, including my wife and my parents and my siblings. They really have just been putting the pressure on me ever since I was an atheist to go and visit this church.
Well, I guess let's stop you right there. So
yeah,
you were pretty well indoctrinated as a kid then.
Yes, I was, for sure.
And what was your key? What I guess convinced that there's that this stuff wasn't real?
One of the things is I always had a passion for apologetics, which is just the defense of the faith. And so I spent a lot of time studying and trying to give answers to people that would come to me within Christianity. And I became more and more dissatisfied with the answers that I was giving people. I honestly was feeling guilty about trying to defend the God of the Old Testament, just genocide and slavery and all these horrible things in the Bible. And I just felt more and more like, I got to find the answers for myself and find out if they really have something behind them, because I'm giving people all these surface answers that are not satisfying me. that really was the catalyst for me to start digging deeper, and just it became like it just started unraveling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I started really asking all the big names in apologetics. You know, Josh McDowell, Ravi Zacharias, William Lane Craig. Once I started contacting these people and getting their answers, I just found out, wow, this is a house of cards.
Right. Kind of. I don't know. Particularly William Lane Craig, who is an excellent debater. But to me, his answers are kind of hollow, and it's always the same kind of thing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you look at what he advocates and the answers he gives, he just uses mental gymnastics like I've seen no one else I've ever seen.
Yeah.
When it comes to trying to just twist words and put together something that sounds cohesive, but it's not.
All right. So you kind of break out of that, and your family's still really involved with it, and so now we can go back to Bethel Church.
Yeah.
Which, so now, what I found online, the pastor is a very charismatic guy, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what his name was.
Bill Johnson.
Bill Johnson, yes. And he not only was talking about, I guess we'll get into the glory clouds, but he's also talking about feathers appearing and all sorts of other, I guess kind of biblical things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So did he start this church?
No, actually, he took it over. I think he and his father. Bill Johnson is in a long line of preachers. I think maybe even back 5 generations. But his father was the pastor before him. They used to live actually in another town just outside of Reading. It escapes me, but anyway, then they moved into Reading, kind of took over the church that was there. And it was an Assemblies of God church, and then they cut off from that affiliation because they started getting more radical. And then even the Assemblies of God, which is pretty radical.
And so,
anyway, yeah.
Were they always faith healers?
They wouldn't call themselves. See, there's a bad stigma that goes with the name and the label of faith healers. And so, a lot of the current, prophets and healers today, like to pull away from those types of terms. So they won't even use them. But yeah, I mean, that's basically the mentality they have. A big part of their ministry is their healing ministry.
Okay.
And yeah, so what they try to do is just draw in people, and that's, I can get into that, kind of let me know what direction you want to go with it.
Well, but, I kind of just want to set up the foundation of the church as much as possible. They do make some claims, about God's healings, I guess. In particular, there was a baby in a hospital that had a hole in his heart that, they say that they prayed over and that, healed the hole in this baby's heart, or Jesus did, or God did, after their prayers.
Right.
The other thing is, talking about feathers appearing while he's out at dinner and stuff like this. And he was connecting that back to the glory clouds.
What is he eating for dinner?
Well, I don't know.
That has feathers.
So I guess, we've established, they are faith healers. I mean, there's no other real word for it, is there?
Right.
Even though
I would definitely put them in that category. Absolutely.
So I guess, so they're doing the faith healings. They have things appearing such as clouds of glitter and feathers.
Right.
So,
yeah.
The feathers, I guess one feather could come from anywhere, but what is a glory cloud?
Yeah, so the glory cloud, what I did is I went to Bethel for 10 days. I just immersed myself in the environment completely, just interviewed many of those who claimed healing and went to every single service and talked to all the senior pastors, or most of them, went to the healing rooms, got people prayed over, got prophesied over. So the glory cloud was one of the experiences I had the very first night I showed up. It was a Friday night service. And I was familiar with the glory cloud concept, and I knew that it happens usually about every 2 weeks. And they say that it's this glory glitter from God. It's the presence of God that's just kind of floating around the air, and you can collect it on your hands and everything. And so I wasn't sure if I would get to have the experience, but I was kind of hoping that I would, obviously, when I got there. And so the night that I showed up, there had the worship service, and then the preachers stood up and started to talk. Then all of a sudden, I started looking around the room, and people are holding up their iPhones, and they're pointing it up into the rafters above the sanctuary. All of a sudden, the pastor's like, "The glory cloud, it's here!" And he's really excited, and he starts just changing the sermon completely to adapt to this glory cloud message. And And so sure enough, there was glitter floating around in the air. It was only in this one side of the sanctuary. It was only on the right-hand side of the sanctuary up front. And you could see it just kind of floating around there in the air. And so I was intrigued, obviously. And so after the sermon, when everything was down and the glitter was kind of floating around, I go up there and people are wiping it up with their hands and they're taking pictures of it and everything. And then all of a sudden it just dawned on me. It just all clicked and I realized what was happening. And it just seemed like no one else had noticed. But
Jesus came down and said hello?
Yeah, it was God. It was absolutely just Jesus Christ that showed up. So, what else can I say?
Glitter.
And he brought glitter?
Well, interview over.
Did he stop in the 1970s?
Well, he wasn't trying to help the starving children in Africa, but but he definitely had the priorities right. Anyway,
sorry.
So what happened is that during the worship service, there was these people that stand up front and they paint pictures on these huge canvases. And as they're painting, they're doing it prophetically, and it's giving people, they're painting in the spirit, they call it. So this one lady, she was taking this bottle of glitter, that literally just a bottle of glitter, full of little tiny particles, and she was flinging it at the painting, covering the entire painting in this glitter. And you could see it. It was going off of the painting, it was catching in the air, it was falling down underneath the painting on the stage. And I just realized, I was like, wow, that's where it came from. Because here's the deal. In the sanctuary, there's these huge blinding lights up above up in the ceiling. And there's this constant draft because they have this big ventilation system. So it's the perfect environment for any tiny little particle to glisten. Even when I first showed up, it was dust. I could see the dust. It even almost looked like it was shiny. So you put a little bit of glitter in the air and boom, you got a glory cloud. It's not a cloud. It never was. Not even in the videos that they post themselves. It was never anything like that.
So you were able to recreate this pretty conclusively.
I was, absolutely. Because I went up there and I started wiping where people were wiping their hands and saying, oh, there's the glory of God as they're looking at the glitter on their hands. And I look up and there's the painting, literally with the same glitter, right above where they're wiping their hands. And they're picking it up and collecting it and putting it in their wallet. And I pointed it out. I was like, well, that looks like the same stuff. So I went up to the artist, the lady who had done the painting, and I asked her about it. And she actually showed me the bottle. She pulled it out and she says, here's the stuff. Here's the glitter. And I was, thank you so much. I took a picture. The next day I went to Michael's and I bought my own bottle of glory glitter.
So, okay, why would they think that these were from God in the first place? What is the connection there that they've made?
Well, the connection is that they are so desperately looking for any kind of physical manifestation of God. They have all the feeling in their heart and they have all the sensations and everything, but they don't have anything that's real. And so they latch on to, these little feathers or whatever. Basically, the feathers they find, they're like stuff that's in your pillow. It's the down from people's jackets when they walk into church. So you know how...
Okay, so yeah. God's love manifests as goose down, and Jesus' disco love from the 70s manifests as glitter.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. They cling on to this stuff, and quite honestly, they're looking for it so desperately. Like, even when I pointed this out to the artist who was doing it herself, who was splashing the glitter on this painting, she didn't even, it just went right over her head. She had no idea even what I was talking about. They want it so bad that they're willing to believe it, regardless of where the facts are taking them.
It's interesting because a feather appearing or something like this, I would never make that kind of connection.
Oh, right.
And I think that a lot of this is the pastor making that connection for them.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, does he know how the clouds are made?
I wouldn't put it past him, but I don't think so. I think that they're all just willfully ignorant. And here's the deal, that they are connected to a lot of these types of groups and organizations around the world. So they all kind of feed off of each other. And once one of them starts to see some glitter somewhere, then the other ones start to find feathers, Yeah. And so they're all working off of each other and kind of creating and stimulating this frenzy.
So I guess...
Can I insert something here?
Yeah.
I watched the Glory Clouds video on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I have to say that using glitter in that seems actually rather wasteful because it looks an awful lot like dust in a sunbeam to me.
Yeah, no, quite honestly, like I said, when I first walked into the church and I was looking up, I saw just the dust glistening against the lights, and I thought, hey, that's almost it right there. But then when we put the extra glitter in the painting, and later on when it started floating around, it was like, oh, obviously,
Right.
And the thing about those videos on YouTube is that they're so zoomed in to create the illusion of something, you're seeing something bigger than you are. Anyway, it's all just fabricated. It's for the illusion.
Well, and we see this kind of stuff actually a lot. I mean, Sai Baba has had his ash,
Yep.
but I mean, that was clearly a magic trick. I mean, he was caught, so many times making that happen.
So he had his ash handed to him?
Yes, many times. So I think that there is, this is done a lot. I mean, this is not a unique thing, I don't think.
Right.
These kinds of manifestations.
Yeah. It's the exact same problem you see with the healings. Is that people go in there with a sore neck. They get in this excited frenzy because of the worship music and the repetition and everything. And it creates this environment where it's just pregnant with expectation. And
Right.
so then the placebo effect kicks in, and they might get the soreness out of their neck a little bit. And they'll go home, and next thing you know, their neck was broken and God healed it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they grasp onto every little tiny thing they can find and proclaim it as this massive miracle.
Well, do you know who Brazzo is?
Brazzo.
Yeah, Brazzo.
No.
You're supposed to drink when we say that, by the way. Brazzo is a gazer, and he is from Croatia. And here in the States, he's traveling all over the United States. It's $8 to go and see him. And he's a healer who doesn't claim to be a healer.
Oh.
And the way that the shtick works is, he has, I guess, a handler. And she's an actress, and she comes out and she primes the crowd. When you first go in there, there's music playing. It's like Hypnosis 101. They are creating a whole experience, and she comes out and she talks about Brazzo and how fantastic he is, and talks about the energy and all the kind of buzzwords that we hear these people using, and energy is of course a big one. And then Brazzo comes out, stares at you for 8 minutes, and leaves. And people all over, I mean, the healings that they claim. Kimberly, did you go to Brazzo with me?
I went to the first one.
Okay, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you have to understand that they're not just paying to see it once. They were selling all day tickets to these people, and they would once an hour go into a room. The exact same thing would happen, the whole staring and the music and the not saying anything and the testimonials, and they'd clear the room and then they'd fill it up again with some of the same exact people who, like you say, they travel with, and they follow them around the country.
Yeah.
And, and a lot like what you're saying here, they'll take any small bit of what they would call evidence, but which, we would never use that term for what they're claiming
Right.
is evidence. But they'll take any story, anything, and they just so desperately want to believe it.
And
Yeah. Actually, when I go into the healing rooms in Bethel, they give you this little card. It's a little pamphlet. And what it says on it, it says, if you feel a reoccurrence of your old symptoms after you leave here, then you need to just ignore them and believe on faith that you've been healed. So basically what they're saying is a disclaimer. When you walk out of here, you're not going to feel any better, but just keep believing.
yeah, Brazzo
Okay.
has a
Does
similar.
this
blaming
lead
the
to a
victim,
diminishing membership?
I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead and say that again.
Does this lead to a diminishing membership as, people who've been faith healed feel the symptoms of their original malady and then, die from them?
Well, that's the very interesting part, is that Christians have a get out of jail free card for everything, because if they die, then that was God's will to take them on to heaven, right? If they just get terribly sick, then at least they didn't die, and if they get a little bit better, then God obviously healed them. And so they constantly believe, and this is one of the things, because Brian, one of the reasons of going here wasn't just because I wanted to expose, which I did, but I felt like that there was actual harm being done.
It does seem
There
like
it
it.
is.
Brazzo has his disclaimer, basically, you get a healing, right? But he doesn't claim to be a healer. And they tell people, you still need to go see your physician. The other thing that they prime you, though, the healing may not happen today. It may, it may take a couple of weeks, but look out for it.
It may not happen to you. It may happen to the picture of somebody who's in your wallet.
Exactly. Well, he can heal, anybody that you have a picture of on your phone that's turned off as well.
Well, actually, a recent thing that just happened in Colorado, we had that fire up here down south, and the 2 fatalities were an older couple that apparently called their church and said, "Oh, please make sure everyone prays for us." And instead of getting out of their house, they were packed and everything, but apparently they decided to put their, it sounds to me at least, like they put their fate in the hands of God.
Right.
But you didn't take common sense precautions instead.
But this is even worse.
There's an old joke about that, and I'm sure we've all heard it. I sent you a rowboat, I sent you a helicopter.
Yeah.
Why didn't you get on those?
Yeah. But this one's worse.
Yeah, but no, it's a sad thing when they put you put so much faith in that and you don't let the common sense. Like if they would have gotten out earlier, they probably would be alive today. But they decided, it's not too bad. Let's call our church, ask for prayers, and then we'll be ready just in case. But it was too late by then.
Yeah, but this is worse because they're telling people if you have a reoccurrence, they're not telling them go to your doctor. They're telling them to keep believing.
To just keep believing.
That's right. I think this is the point that Jason's trying to get to here, is that the harm from what they're doing way outweighs, any healing that could possibly happen.
Right. Yeah. There's one of the main pastors there at Bethel. His name is Pastor Danny Silk, and he told me a story about a young woman who had 3 kids, and she had cancer, and she was relying upon the faith, the prayer of faith, and these healing rooms and everything. And instead of getting treatment, and she died within just, a couple months. And so there is a direct correlation to, here's this woman believing on faith that she's going to be healed and refusing the treatment, refusing any kind of help, and her family pays for it. She and her family.
We've talked about that several times in our past podcasts, is that kind of mentality.
Well, because we see it with all sorts of alternative medicine therapy stuff as well. Whether it be homeopathy, naturopaths, Life Vessel is another one that, that we're concerned the same kind of things that are happening with them. There's the John of God lights. That people are using for healing. There's all sorts of these healing modalities out there that have not been shown to work, and faith healing is one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was an older lady that came to Bethel. It was one of the saddest things to me because she brought her husband, and he was mentally disturbed. He was mentally ill. She was so excited the first night she showed up, and I could just see it in her face. She was going to get healed. He was going to get healed. And I saw her in the prayer rooms the next few days. And by the end of her trip, by the time she left, she was deflated. You could just see her face. I talked to her, and it's like nothing had happened. And she took the blame on for herself because, and this is, they take the blame because they say, it's not God's fault, it's my fault. I didn't have enough faith. And so there's these people, they're leaving Bethel, and if they didn't get healed, it's not Bethel's fault. It's not the healer's fault. It's their own fault because they didn't have enough faith. So these poor people have all this weight on their shoulders because they're still sick or their loved one is still sick, and they have to deal with the fact that they didn't have enough faith. I talked to the leader of the healing rooms, and he even confirmed that with me. He said, yes, when you're not healed, it's your fault because you didn't have enough faith.
Well, and that's pretty common. And, Popoff, W.V. Grant, Oral Roberts, Pat Robertson, it's typical with them. It's not their fault. It's not God's fault. It's your fault. You didn't believe.
Yeah.
Right. Or you didn't interpret something correctly, or, there's always this victim blaming mentality. And unfortunately they're set up, it seems, to even appreciate that. Like they don't just buy it, they're primed for it. It goes down very easily.
So, this is something we've talked about a lot, but now I guess another interesting thing that you do though is that even in the face of all of these kinds of things, you spend a lot of time reaching out to churches as an atheist.
Yeah. I've started a program I call Into the Churches, or an evening with an atheist. Quite honestly, I just kind of got tired of preaching to the choir with us, kind of not really connecting on a heart level, one-on-one with Christians, because I was in that place at one point. And I know that I wish I would have had people around me that I could have gone to, that I knew I could trust. And so what I'm trying to do with this program is go into the churches and just let them see us as atheists, that we're good, moral, normal people. And just let them have that opportunity, give us a chance to plant some seeds and not try to convince them that they're wrong, but just plant some seeds and say, have you ever thought about this? And, yeah.
And so you set up these groups with these pastors. It looks like most of the churches you've gone to are Protestant churches. Is that correct at this point?
Right, that's correct. A lot of it has to do with because that's my background.
Okay.
That's what I'm familiar with. But I've also very specifically chosen churches that are more conservative in nature, because I feel like that's where the need is. That's where people have the most lack of understanding when it comes to atheism. And so I've specifically pulled out those churches, and I contact the pastor and get one-on-one dialogue with him. I'll go out to coffee or something and just connect with him face-to-face and say, hey, we want to try to tear down some common misconceptions that we have about one another, to open up some respectful dialogue. We just want the opportunity to show you guys that we're good, moral people. We're not trying to deconvert you necessarily. So that's the approach that I have when I present it to the church. And
how well has that been received?
It's very well received when I sit down face to face with a pastor. I've actually been very surprised. They've all been very positive. There's only a couple churches that have turned me down, but most of them have been like, yeah, let's do this thing. And I think a lot of it has just to do with the type of approach that we have of just trying to not be too confrontational, trying to steer away from debate mode and just open, friendly dialogue between us. And so they've been very receptive to that. Now, if I try to email or make phone calls and do this over, the phone lines, it doesn't work. It's got to be personal.
Yeah.
But I've had a lot of success, and I think that I'm really excited about this program of going into the churches because I can just see the potential of connecting communities where we as atheists have an opportunity to speak to the actual people where the issue is, to go into the church, to go to the heart of the problem and address it right there in a non-confrontational, friendly way where we can make heart connections with people. Instead of trying to convince them on the spot, we just say, just plant some seeds of doubt in their mind.
So what are some of the main reasons that you would want to do this?
Well, one of the main reasons is just myself having come out of Christianity. I've seen people how they look at me as an atheist now. They put a sticker on me, they put a label on me, and some often categorize me in the same place as thieves and murderers, whatever.
No morals.
So it's right, no morals, right.
You even said your wife is still a believer, right? And still fairly active with the church.
Right. So
you have a real strong thing there, I would guess.
Yeah, that's there's a couple different issues that come into play in this whole situation with what kind of drives me to do it. Because on one side of the spectrum, I have my family and many of my friends who have shunned me, who have literally cut off communication and things like this. And then on the other hand, I have my relationship with my wife that we have strove so hard to maintain a connection, even in the midst of our extremely polarizing beliefs. And I can see how I can encourage people that it's possible for people of different beliefs to live together, to be able to communicate, to not, fly off the handle and go into debates all the time. So my goals here is for one, to show the Christians that atheists are moral, regular, normal people, that love our families and, and our country. Then, on the other hand, to show that, we can actually communicate with one another if we do it right. We can communicate. And once you are able to get in, and this is the third point, once you're able to get in and really connect with people and show them that you're not trying to make them believe something, but you just want them to understand you, it opens them up in ways that you wouldn't even imagine for them to reconsider their own beliefs and evaluate themselves. I think there's great potential in a lot of different ways.
Now, are you getting I mean, you're not getting your average atheist or your average theist when you do these things. I mean, you're getting a kind of a select group, aren't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends. Each church is different. Like, the first church that I did was just a real small, kind of intimate group where we just had a lot of discussion. The next church we did down in Evergreen was a large group. We filled up the whole room. Eric Meir and myself and a couple other guys were on a panel, and we had, the congregation asking us questions, and we'd respond. It was a very friendly interaction, very pleasant. Another one we did was a smaller group, again, but it was only with the leadership of the church because they wanted to kind of get a feel for what we were all about. The other one we did down in Golden, that you were a part of, Brian, was, in my opinion, it was a little more edgy. There was a little more of the back and forth. There wasn't that many Christians that actually showed up.
No,
so every experience has been very different and unique.
Yeah, I guess I have a skewed view of this because of the one that I was at. There was, 12, 14 atheists and 4 Christians?
Yeah, I was shocked. I had never, I wasn't expecting that kind of environment or that kind of turnout because I'd actually talked to the pastor beforehand, and he told me that he was going to invite other pastors from different churches. And so I was looking at this as like, this is the start of a very larger kind of outreach into other churches. And so, I kind of just roll with it. Honestly, I think each church probably has their own idea as well about what they're expecting. And since we're on their turf, since we're going into their churches, we have to respect, their leadership and how they want to control it to some degree.
I would say that the people that showed up at ours in particular were very much in the pew Christians. These were very much, they were, I would say, really, really strong in their faith Christians. These were not people that were likely to waffle at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's quite honestly, and I've talked to Pastor Lynn, who was the pastor of that church in Golden. I told him, even though I like these small, intimate groups with your leadership or your other pastors, what my goal is to get a larger group. I want to get a sampling from your entire congregation, because who I want to reach is the average Christian who's sitting in the pew, and I want to connect with them. I want to connect with the people that are your everyday Christian. And so, trying to get a bigger open group is what I was shooting for.
Right. But, having the group that we had, it definitely made for some very interesting conversations.
Oh, yeah.
But like you say, that they were edgy. There could have been a debate at any moment. In fact, it almost happened several times.
Right. Yeah, and that's just, this is a brand new program that we're starting up. I'm excited about it, but it's also kind of learn as you go. Because the goal, I believe personally, that when you sit down and discuss something with them, the goal is not to convince them in the moment. There's no way that we can convince one another sitting down face to face in an argument. It's usually what happens later, even days later, weeks later, when they think back, certain things are nagging them in the back of their minds. And so my goal is to let those things that nag their minds,
And, it was interesting when we got on to the discussion about morals, and I talked about how, I had morals, and that they didn't have to come from a book. And the response that I got from, the gentleman who was the philosophy teacher was that he had never heard that argument before, and that he never said that we didn't have morals, and so he didn't understand that at all. But yet, isn't that a very common thing that we hear from most of these churches? How do you have morals if you don't believe in God, if you don't, read the Bible?
Right. Yeah. That's the thing, is that the problem is that, especially that gentleman that you were talking about, the philosophy teacher, they're so good at twisting their words and to almost sound like they don't mean what they're saying. Because I know absolutely, especially him, that he knew exactly what you're saying. He knew exactly, he wasn't dumb.
No.
And so, yeah, but they'll word it a little different in where they place the blame as far as, our lack of morals, because they don't want to say we're immoral. They can't say that.
Right. But it was interesting. I felt that gentleman was disingenuous.
Oh, for sure.
I didn't feel that the pastor was disingenuous, but he wasn't as good a debater. You know, even having those conversations weren't really his thing, I don't think. I think that he was much more into the sharing of ideas and information than the philosophy teacher was. The other two that were there didn't speak as much, but I heard an interesting thing from over there either, that they were much more interested in us having a relationship with God, at least he was, than following his rules.
Right. That's just rhetoric, though.
Yeah, that's what I felt about it. So coming away from that particular group, it's like, boy, if you're always talking to those Christians, you know, those ones that are not your average Christian, you know,
right.
how do you make a dent?
Well, I'm a living testimony of that. Like I said, you know, when I was a Christian, you should have heard me. I would get into heated arguments defending my faith. And I would not let on. No one would know. If there was anything that I doubted or questioned, no one would have the slightest idea. I would be the only one that would knew it. And so I do, you know, even though I agree that there's less hope for those, I think there is some.
And I don't even think that, you know, I would not want to make them atheists. That would not be my goal. Yeah. But to even have them be more accepting of atheists, I don't know that they will come away from this with even that piece.
Well, yeah, like I said, I felt like the format and the feel of that night was a little different and not quite exactly what I was intending.
Okay.
Some of the other churches that we've gone into, because I've had to learn to be very diplomatic with my approach when I confront Christians or when I talk about these issues. And so, you know, that was something that I kind of carried the ball with some of the other meetings, and the impression was a lot different because they understood. Because one of the things that's very important to me when we're talking with Christians is that we, first of all, acknowledge any point that they make, anything that we can find. Try to acknowledge anything that we can that might be positive or where we can agree with them. And then to take them, and when we express what we're trying to confront them on, we don't express it and say, here's the problem with what you're reasoning. We say, here's the problem that I personally have that I can't get past. You know, I have an issue, I have a problem. You almost put it on yourself. You put the weight of the conflict on yourself and say, my conscience won't let me do this. Or my own, you know, I just can't get past this problem with your reasoning. And when you put it on yourself and you own it, it changes the dynamics to where they're much more receiving of what you're saying. And so that's very important when it comes to these types of dialogues. And like I said, if we can get a bigger congregation, the larger group of people out there, and not just these hand-picked people by the pastor who like to argue,
right?
You know, then it's a completely different feel.
Well, it was interesting though. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kimberly.
Oh, I just wanted to say, Jason, I totally agree with you. And Brian and I have had this conversation in the past and even just yesterday, the day before.
Yesterday.
I think he and I both come off very confrontational and are not doing any of the stuff you are talking about. Like, we apparently, and I'll just speak for me, although I think Brian's experienced this too. It doesn't seem to matter how I say it. I put it in the nicest way I know how, and it still comes off confrontational. And I just seem to be perceived that way. Have you considered, because I do think, you know, like you say, the population who showed up at that meeting, you didn't hand pick us or anything like that. It was just volunteers of the atheists, and they had their own agenda. Have you thought about kind of training people on how to do this? Because I came away with it really recognizing how poorly I'm expressing myself to a crowd like this. And I consider myself fairly articulate most of the time, but I'm clearly not getting through to them.
Well, the atheists there were all the way from the proselytizing Unitarian to Kimberly.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously part of atheism as our diversity. Yeah. You know, that's part of the beauty of it. But I think yes, absolutely, Kimberly. What I've already talked to is, you know, trying to get just a core group of people where we all are on the same page, the same type of communication. I think it helps a lot to have been a Christian beforehand and understand their rhetoric, because you can say the things that they understand and be careful not to trigger other things that will just turn them off. I think that, you know, finding a core group of people like that, you know, that are apt at that type of communication is vital. Yeah.
I've got to throw in here, you said that you receive pretty good responses when you touch upon people one-to-one. I have to ask, is it possible that the good responses that you're getting when you get people, when you set up the meetings, is it possible that what they're really wanting to do is not so much listen to you as maybe bring you back into the fold?
Oh, absolutely. I fully acknowledge that. And that's part of the reason I'm able to even do this, is because, I fully acknowledge that their goals are going to be to try to win me back. And, let them have their best shot at it. I don't care.
But they were very upfront about that.
Yeah.
When they introduced themselves, they told us that they have a relationship with Jesus and they want all of you to have one too. They want everybody to have a relationship with Jesus. And they made it very clear that they were going to proselytize.
Yeah. Yeah. But they see that as an honorable thing because they're trying to save you from hell.
Right.
And so, that's a small price for me, in my opinion, to pay to be able to get in and actually talk about atheism. Because, think about how many atheists get to actually speak in a church. Not very often. So, if they want to proselytize to me, I say bring it on, as long as you let me get a few words in edgewise.
Yeah, I didn't have an issue with that, and I had expected that. In fact, when Kimberly and I were out at dinner before that, that was one of the things that we figured that would happen as proselytizing. Because how could it not? It's part of their doctrine. It's their job to bring you back to Jesus.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and let me just share briefly, one of the meetings that I really felt was very successful was in Evergreen, and I had just a whole bunch of Christians come up to me afterwards and say, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. They thanked me over and over again about our approach, about our attitude, about our presentation. I got a lot of compliments. Eric Muir and us both, we got a lot of compliments about just our approach and how we came about it. I had this one older lady that came up to me and she said, Jason, she had to be in her 80s. She said, my husband has been an atheist for forever. And she said, I never really understood him. And she said, but after tonight, after you guys shared, she says, I understand him now. And that type of stuff. Another guy comes up to me and he's like, your guys' reasoning and the way you guys argued for what you believe, you guys, I have nothing to say. I think I'm going to convert over to your side. I was looking around. I hope the pastor didn't notice. So I felt very happy about the approach we were able to present ourselves, and having that older lady come up to me, it was like, this is what it's all about for me.
No,
honestly,
that right there, the older lady just being able, now she understands her husband a little bit better.
Yeah.
That's huge, because that's really the kind of, what you're going for here is for people to come around going, okay, I don't agree with these atheists, but I understand a little bit better about where they're coming from. The people that we spoke to the other night, they already knew where we were coming from.
Yeah, and that's why, those smaller groups are okay. Like I said, I think there is a chance that some of them might be willing to think further later on after they're away from it. But the goal obviously is for the bigger groups and the bigger congregation.
Yeah, and certainly it was a lot of fun, and I like a good debate. So I would have showed up for a debate, anyway. But right. I do think that your format is better in that it's just a sharing of ideas, and that we don't want to get into a huge debate. It's just to try and let people know where the other person is coming from. And I think that that's valuable, but I think it's more valuable I think the larger group, I think you're onto something there.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we got into, which I thought was a good topic, was when we were talking about legislation.
Yeah.
And how the effect of legislation, that a lot of our fears are centered around that, because how are you Christians out there, how is your vote going to affect me in my private life? And if anything, that's a message that I would like to kind of bring into this whole approach, going into the churches, because if we can like you said, not affect their beliefs so much, but at least affect maybe when they go to the voting booth, if they think, if I vote for this person, is it going to affect the way other people are allowed to believe what they want to believe in their own privacy? Right. And so maybe just changing not so much their beliefs, but just their mindset of how they appreciate us as atheists, and maybe our freedom, just in general, all of our freedom.
Well, that discussion was interesting in that it took us a little while to man, there's so much anger on both sides when it comes to legislation.
Oh yeah.
That, you know, and the gentleman who was a philosopher made some you know, I mean, I think he kind of misunderstood what we were saying, you know, because we understand that when people go to vote, they're going to vote their conscience, right?
Right.
And
right.
And really we don't want to have it any other way most of the time, but what people were trying to point out to him was, well, how does your decision affect other people's personal freedoms? And that message was there, but man, it was not well received.
Right. Especially by that one.
It a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think specifically, that guy the philosopher that was there really put a big damper on the whole approach that we could have had, because just the way he kept, you know, twisting things and coming back, it just wasn't very, it wasn't very conclusive. It wasn't good for just the whole discussion. So,
no, but he was very smart, very intellectual, and he had an agenda, and he was very good at accomplishing that agenda. He was there for debate. He was there to let us know you know, that we were wrong, and he was going to use, you know, philosophy to show us such. And that was really his approach. And maybe it wasn't necessarily conducive to what you were trying to accomplish, but it made it really enjoyable.
Yeah, that's true. It's entertaining. Yeah. No, I enjoy debates personally. I really, I've gotten into a lot of debates with Christians, you know, and we've hashed it out, and I enjoy that as well. Very much so. Yeah. Cause it really does crumble. I mean, their philosophy, once you're able to pick it apart, it just completely crumbles, and there's nothing behind it.
Well, I would definitely go and do it again. It was quite, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I don't know. Kimberly, how did you feel about it?
I thought it was really neat. I really appreciated the opportunity. I'm a little glad to hear you say that philosopher guy might have been more of the problem, because I really kind of came away with it a little bit bashing myself. You know, like I said, feeling like I couldn't communicate with these people as well as I would like to. I understand what you're saying about getting your small group, and there's a little part of me going, oh, but I want to be a part of it, but maybe I'm not the right person. So I definitely would love to try it again. I think what you're trying to do is really great.
Yeah.
And I think it has a lot of potential. You know, as I said in there, I don't get the opportunity to talk to a lot of people because they're not in my life. You know, I hear a lot of people talk about having their religious friends, and I'll admit it, I've, over the years, kind of removed all of my religious friends from my life. The only ones I have are my family. Boy, I can spark a fight there in a quarter of a second that will just have people hanging up the phone. But they won't have a discussion about it. So I would love to talk about it some more and find ways of getting the point across in a way that's not combative, but that also doesn't give up ground or lose the whole thing. So it's a real interesting conundrum for me of how to do that. So I'm kind of hoping to be able to do it again, if I don't actually participate, or at least maybe watch and just kind of get more of those lessons. I think would be really important.
Yeah, for sure. If you don't mind, Brian, can I mention my website?
You plug whatever you need to plug, buddy.
Yeah, so it's intothechurches.com, intothechurches.com. And there's a way to contact me there, of course. But yeah, I would really like to know of anyone who's interested in being involved in this. You know, there's a lot of different parts to play because, you know, contacting the churches, meeting with the pastors. There's several meetings that usually happen beforehand, before we actually have the, you know, the initial contact. And anyway, so anyone who wants to be involved, I'd very much be appreciative of any contact in that way. But
and Jason, I don't know if you know how much people in the meetup groups and stuff are psyched about this kind of thing. I think you'd have, like, you asked for only 5 to 7 and you got 11 people from that, because I know I wrote to you personally and said I didn't get in time, can I still go? Brian didn't sign up through the meetup site, and that's all fine.
Yeah, but he knew
There's
I was
a lot
coming.
of people really psyched about this, and I think the only reason you may not have heard more is that they don't know how to get to you, so hopefully this will help that. And if you can figure out a way to give them more notice, I think you'd very easily be able to assemble that army of atheists. We really want to be heard, for sure, I think, as a community.
Yeah, so what...
Yeah.
I was going to say, we're going to do...
Website,
oh, go ahead.
Well, on my website, I have a schedule. So there's a page that that gives, so people can go and look and say, oh, okay, maybe I'll be able to go to that one whenever it is.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and don't worry about it. If you're in your cars right now, it'll be in the show notes, and we'll also be linking to your site on our kind of friends page.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. And then, I had another incredibly important point. And it slipped my mind.
Well, okay, but there's one more thing that I want to talk about. And of course, I met you on the night that we went to go to see Sam Harris. And Kimberly was there. So what did you think of Sam Harris's approach there?
I'm intrigued. I really I love Sam Harris, first of all. And, I was very much intrigued by the discussion of free will. Because even within, the atheist community, there's a lot of, different types of viewpoints and opinions and stuff flying around. But, one of the main things that Sam Harris said that night was talking about how we don't choose to make the choice to how we think. And how you can take a couple steps back to that initial point of, like, that thought that popped into my mind. I didn't make the choice for it to be there. When I'm choosing, because his example was pick a city, any city, and you have a certain amount of cities that pop into your head and you choose which one. But that free will choice of which one am I going to choose, that wasn't your decision. So anyway, there were so many good points and lengthy discussion could be had on that topic.
I don't know. I enjoyed it, and certainly, I found it really interesting for the same reasons you do. I went and I read the book, and I didn't feel like I got that much more out of the book than I did his lecture. His point is very brief, but yet the way that in which he backs it up is, I don't know, I'm having trouble following it completely.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think Daniel Dennett, I haven't really studied into his philosophy on free will, but I think I might agree a little more with his approach.
The compatibilist approach.
A little more compatibilist approach, yeah.
One of the things it's difficult to accept that you don't, I mean, we have this illusion of free will, if what he's saying is right. It's almost, we're experiencing it. We feel like we're making these decisions, but yet if we're not, it's a difficult thing to accept.
Right. Yeah.
So I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I did too. There's the thing about free will is that there's a difference almost between free will and free choice, because even a Christian, if you talk to them about free will and you say, okay, am I having the choice to make this choice? Basically, all our choices are what is available to us. The only choices that we can make are based on what is already available to us to choose from. So in a sense, we have the choice to make a choice based on what's available to us in our brain, what's been presented, but we don't have any choice whatsoever for what was input to allow us to make those choices in the first place.
Right.
So,
but it starts to seem awfully circular, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And ultimately, obviously, I think everything does boil down to a materialistic answer, of course, And so you do have to just acknowledge that things are as they only could be.
But one of the points he made is that if what he is proposing is correct, that this is a bigger problem for Christians than even evolution or some of these other theories. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that.
No, but I think he's got a good point there, though.
Yeah.
I think that, but he wasn't even just saying it was a bigger problem for them. He was saying more like it's going to become more of a divisive issue for them, because once they really catch on to this being their pet peeve of free will, it's going to be a hard thing for people to swallow, regardless of whether you're in the religious community or not. When it comes to the idea that I'm not really free to make any choice I want, but I'm limited to the choices that are already in my brain. This is a hard concept. Determinism is a hard concept for a lot of people to grasp a hold of, regardless of whether you're religious.
Right. Yeah, so it's an interesting point. Certainly, I think that the idea of free will that Christians present probably doesn't exist. And I don't know who's closer to Dennett or Samuel Harris, but clearly it's a much bigger question than I would have ever thought.
Right.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, good. We may have lost everybody else. Is anybody else there?
No.
Oh no, good.
I'm here.
Oh, Kimberly?
I'm sorry.
I'm back.
I've just been quiet and letting you all jaw.
Oh, okay. All right. Kimberly?
I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. Brian,
No.
Okay.
there's a couple other things about Bethel that were extremely intriguing, but
Yeah,
I don't know how much you want to get into anything else.
Go ahead. Does anybody have a problem with continuing?
Not at
Go
all.
ahead.
All right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that we weren't done with Bethel, and I was trying to make a smooth transition because it seemed like a really natural transition there.
Oh no, that's fine. Well, there's just a few other things because there's three things that I went for. I went for to expose the glory cloud or to find out about it. I went there for the prophetic proclamations that they give over people, and then also for the healing ministry. And what I ended up doing after talking to the senior pastors, so I talked to the senior pastors and I said, I need some documentation. I need something here to show me that there's actually healings going on. And every single one of the senior pastors, they said, I'm sorry, but we just don't have any documentation of anything, of these thousands of miracles. We have nothing. And they said that the doctors, they put all the blame, every single one of them, they put the blame on the doctors who are afraid of lawsuits and stuff to expose that these healings took place. And
I am picturing Alec Guinness right now. You don't need to see our documentation. These aren't the miracles you're looking for. You can go about your business.
It was so sad and so then I started going to the people, because I went to these healing services, so I started seeing people who are actually claiming healing. So I decided, okay, well, if the pastors aren't going to give you any documentation, I'm going to go to the people who are getting healed. So I went and interviewed people that were actually claiming healing. One man in the service, he stands up and he's like, praise Jesus, I've been healed from a tumor. I have a tumor the size of my thumb that has completely disappeared, 100% in the last 2 minutes. And his friend sitting next to him confirmed it. It was in his chest, a tumor the size of his thumb. The whole church just erupts with just praising and just glory and all this stuff. So I go to him afterwards and I walk up to this guy and I'm like, that's an amazing testimony you got, that the tumor just disappeared. Do you mind if I just feel it and see, that it's gone? He's like, oh no, go ahead. So I put my hand on his chest and there's a bump the size of my thumb right there.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, okay, are you just lying? I mean, what's the deal? There's a tumor right here on your chest. And he didn't even skip a beat. He was like, oh yeah, but it's disappearing and I know, I have faith that it's disappearing. And I'm thinking, you just told thousands of people that it was gone, 100% gone. And
he was probably talking about the other tumor.
Oh my God. And so even the people that I could personally interview, the people that I could walk up to and touch and say, okay, give me your testimony. Every single time this happened, it just went completely flat. Another guy had been healed of cancer instantly. He gave me the name of his doctor and his hospital. And so I'm like, awesome. Okay, now I get some proof. So I called up the hospital and they're like, we've never heard of that guy.
Oh, wow.
We've never heard of him. And this guy's one of the main leaders at Bethel. They gave him a free SUV just so that, so he could be a part of the healing team. And so, there's some definite fraud going on. And I don't know if it's just because they're so intellectually blind or if
Sounds like chill work to me.
Yeah, if they're purposely doing this. But it's really sad. And so actually talking to these people, then I went and got prophesied over. I didn't tell anyone I was atheist. I just had a nice smile on my face, acted like all the rest of the Christians, and I got prophesied over by hundreds of people, literally. And every single one of them talked about how God was using me powerfully and how they could feel the anointing all over me and the Spirit of God was just amazing and I'm doing wonderful things for Jesus. And not one of them had the slightest little inkling that I was a heathen in their midst. Wow. And it just so clearly exposed just the fraudulent nature of how they just prophesy over everyone and give them all these amazing, predictions of the future and how God's going to use them powerfully. And here I am standing right there in front of them, and they'd have no idea that I'm a non-believer.
Well, it's confirmation bias.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly strong.
They were biased toward believing you were confirmed.
Yeah, because I didn't tell them otherwise, and so they're just telling me what God's doing in my life, and I'm just actually one lady, after she was done, after about 20 minutes of prophesying over me, I just couldn't resist. I said, actually, I don't believe in Jesus. I'm not a Christian, and you should have seen the look on her face. It was just like, oh, what do I do with this guy?
Oh no.
She was completely shocked after giving me this prophecy, and because they take these little drawings and they draw pictures of you and what you're doing for Jesus and all this stuff, and then they give it to you. And afterwards, this other guy told him, I'm like, no, actually, I'm not even a Christian, and he just didn't know what to say. He was completely at a loss for words. Is
this like automatic writing? What they're doing?
Yeah. Well, they sit you down in front of them, and they sit across, and first they hold your hands. And they take both of your hands in theirs, and they close their eyes, and they do this little pray thing. And then they let go, and they pick up a crayon, and they start drawing a picture. And then they prophesy what this picture means in your life.
Okay.
So this guy drew is this big, giant sequoia tree that with the branches reaching out. And he said it was how established that I am in Jesus, and the branches were me with this branches of protection over all the Christians under me.
Wouldn't it be ironic if that prophecy was actually true, except it's the people that you're reaching out to as an atheist?
Well, hey, there you go. But obviously, I see myself as reaching out for sure, but not for the cause that they're thinking.
So they do automatic writing and they do drawings.
Yep, and then they also do what they call sozo. They do a sozo
Christian
session.
Ouija boards. What?
It's freaky. I literally had to stop in the middle of the session because they call it sitting in daddy's lap session. And it's for people who are going through a hard time or a tragedy like an addiction. And the prophet spends one-on-one time with you, teaching you how to talk to God. And they charge $75 for the session, which is ridiculous because the whole point of Christianity is that you're not supposed to charge for prayer and for healing and all this stuff.
If I'm paying $75 for a session and it involves a lap, I'm just saying I'm not the one who's going to be sitting in somebody else's lap.
Yeah.
It was really freaky, but the sad thing is that one of these young men, they walk in for a sozo session because you can see he's going through a really hard time, some kind of tragedy, and he didn't have any money. And so they're like, well, they forced him to set up a payment plan so that he could go because nobody's.
That's just sick.
Yeah, sounds like the kind of stuff we heard with what was it, the Mormons?
Oh no,
Scientology. Yeah, Scientology did crap like that.
No, the Mormons aren't doing that kind of stuff that I'm aware of.
It was Scientology,
yeah.
Yeah, that sounds Scientology.
That's messed up.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people I saw being wheeled away in wheelchairs, limping off a stage and out of the healing rooms, obviously not healed.
Yeah.
And how many of these people are giving up their doctors? I mean, are they still all doing regular treatments, or are they telling these people that they don't need them?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think it really does depend on the individual because I know for sure there are people who are quitting their treatment, who are throwing their pills away. I know that's happening. And like I said, they're taking the blame on themselves. They're not having enough faith, so they got to just keep pressing. They got to keep going to Bethel.
Right.
They got to keep making this pilgrimage to Mecca. Because what else are they going to do?
No, but are they having
now? Don't bring the Muslims into this.
Are they having the same problems with like children dying and stuff like that? Like that the followers of Christ Church are having? They're the faith healers from Oregon.
Oh yeah. Well, I personally don't know of a whole lot. I mean, the only people I know of is personally my own family. In my own family, my sister had a really bad problem with her leg where the bones were not growing correctly on her foot, and she couldn't walk. And she kept going to Reading, and she kept trying to get healed. And eventually, it just got worse and worse and worse until they had to give up. And so I've seen this firsthand where, the problem just gets compoundedly worse because they're not doing the treatment that they should be doing with it. I've seen this firsthand. Now, I know that a lot of people, even if, like I said, if they go home and their child dies, they're going to chalk that up to, well, that was God's will.
Well, the followers of Faith Christ, that's exactly what they do. And Oregon just seems to have a lot of faith healing churches. There's another church in Oregon who just had a death. And the one that they're about to try is the first one that they'll be trying after they've removed the protection for faith healing parents. So in Oregon, they are fighting this kind of stuff.
That's
now,
awesome.
Jason, if I can ask you, so you kind of gave up your faith when you kind of saw things weren't working, like they'd make a claim and then there wouldn't be any evidence, and you kind of just finally got fed up with that. Is kind of what I heard you say earlier. But that's clearly not going on for all these other people. Like the lack of evidence doesn't bother them. They go, like you say, you've still got this clearly testable tumor still in your chest, but that doesn't sway them. Do you think you have any insights into what is going on in that mentality that despite the evidence, it doesn't seem to knock their belief even a little bit. It in fact somehow enforces it.
Right. Oh yeah, because they'll just go back to another experience they had that they did attribute to God. Like that one time when they had a headache and it went away after they took some aspirin and prayed. and so, I mean, even my own family, when they talk about, like my sister, she didn't get healed. They'll say, well, it wasn't God's will that time. But remember that other time when such and such was happening, and it's, they had a sore back and and so when something doesn't happen in the moment and isn't fulfilled, they still can retreat to these other experiences that they are chalking up. Because just by virtue of random chance, you're going to have some situation that kind of correlates with a prayer because they're always praying,
Right.
They get better.
It's the Brazzo thing again.
Exactly.
If his gaze doesn't affect you immediately, it will affect you somehow.
Right.
Yeah. So do you have any, like, again, for you, somehow the cumulative effect of this was just like, I've got a new way of thinking. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the pushing point to get more people to come up with that? Or is there one? I mean, it always just intrigues me as to what makes a believer and what makes a skeptic. You're seeing the exact same things that your family did. Your faith was destroyed and you came out the other side. Theirs appears to be unshaken. You got similar genetics. You were raised similarly. What's different? Do you think you have any idea?
Well, I quite honestly, I think that, for instance, even within the Christian sphere, within Christianity, there's such a diversity of people, and I was always a skeptic to a certain point. Even when I was a diehard Christian, when I saw people falling on the floor and laughing their heads off, I was like, that doesn't sound quite right. You know what I mean? And so I know for myself there was, but even, like many denominations of Christians, they are very skeptical of these types of churches, like Bethel. Like, okay, for instance, like the church that we went to, that Kimberly and Brian, that we went to in Golden. If you were to talk about Bethel to those Christians, they would just laugh their heads off. They would say that was the stupidest thing, that it wasn't God, it was Satan manifesting and all that.
Well, certainly they're a minority.
I brought up the glory clouds to my parents, who were Methodists all their lives. And, Methodism's pretty mild. But I brought up the glory clouds to them, and they're like, what is this? And then I had to explain this to them because they had never heard of this. And what I got back was, I'm sure that's not in the Bible anywhere.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's And so there's definitely a strong, like any kind of Baptist, if you meet a Baptist, they're not going to accept this stuff. If a lot of Presbyterian, I mean, it just depends. There's different denominations. So a lot of people are skeptical, even within their own Christianity. But the problem is they compartmentalize. And this is the point that I was trying to make a little bit during the meeting last time we had, is that we pick and choose. We compartmentalize how we evaluate other claims and other beliefs. And we don't use the same critique and the same rigorous rationality for our own as we use for others.
Yeah,
I think that's really true. And I hear all the time from people who claim that atheists are the exact same way, that, we've got our own set of beliefs and dogmas and stuff that we aren't subjecting to it. I think the difference with atheists is that, while, yeah, we're human, we're going to make mistakes like that. We're not always going to be 100% vigilant, but if you're an honest atheist, if you will, you should be able to own up to that when you screw it up. And say, okay, I'm going to have to take that back and do some work.
Yeah.
Well, and even realizing that you may be compartmentalizing, and evaluating it. Is a Christian ever going to say, boy, am I compartmentalizing here? Where, as myself as a skeptic, that is one thing that I will do.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they almost see it as a honorable thing. They see it as a virtue to have faith or compartmentalize or to put certain things into different categories because, we don't question God. So we can't go there.
But certainly in Scripture, Jesus did heal the sick, right?
Yep.
So why would he stop?
Yeah, the reasoning with the Baptists and other churches like that is that they say that once the canon of Scripture was collected and once we have the Bible in our hands, then all miraculous manifestations stopped because it was no longer needed.
Yeah.
So that's their excuse for today why we don't see just miracles everywhere, because they say, well, we didn't need it after the Bible was canonized.
Yeah, well, ask them who put together the first canon. I bet they
the
can't tell
Bible's
you.
the last miracle?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
That's, yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Which Bible?
Well,
the Constantine put together.
So King James is not a miracle.
No, it's not even
The
good.
Living Bible's not a miracle.
No. I would say
all those are based on the original, which is just ridiculous.
I think the NIV is a miracle. It's a miracle anybody uses it.
It stands for the nearly inspired version.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, it's nice. Here I was going to come up with something about Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, but
well, have we covered everything? Because we're at an hour 20 here.
Yeah, no, there's a ton of things, but that's the main.
it was a good conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad we came back to it. I certainly saw a good jumping off point, and we were at about a half hour, so I wanted to move into the other stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's great. So, well, thank you for joining us, and of course, you're welcome back anytime. And sometime maybe come and join us for one of our regular shows. We put together a special interview just for you this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
You're welcome to join us anytime.
Well, I appreciate it. You guys have been so gracious to invite me on, and I really, really appreciate it.
No, and like I say, we'll put your and I need to put Eric Mears stuff on there too. Because I have on our page, I have a link to all of our friends and everything. And I need to make sure that I update that with your address and with.
Thank you again, Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me.
All right.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Amateur Skeptics podcast. For more information about the Amateur Skeptics, go to amateurskeptics.com. To send us feedback, suggestions, or big flaming insults, feel free to contact us at WTF@amateurskeptics.com. Other contact information can be found on our website.
You can leave a voicemail for the Amateur Skeptics podcast at 720-295-7785. Music for this podcast was provided by OFM. To find out more about OFM, go to myspace.com/OFMHQ. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons, No Derivatives 3.5 license. Thank you for listening to the Amateur Skeptics podcast.
Amateur Skeptics website, Facebook, and podcast album art is provided by and copyright Shadow Knight Digital Portraiture. Larger prints or custom pieces are available upon request.